The John Birch Society Report. George Washington stated, "Truth will ultimately prevail where pain is taken to bring it to light." Truth is the major weapon of the John Birch Society Report. We will return after these words from our sponsor. The John Birch Society Report presents this weekly broadcast to bring you commentary and analysis of today's events. Our commentator today is Mr. Robert Welch, president and founder of the John Birch Society. Although Mr. Welch has served as a director of several business organizations, in 1957 he gave up most of his business responsibilities to devote almost all his time to the anti-communist cause. Mr. Welch's topic today, Step by Step.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Robert Welch. For about 15 years, I have been seriously studying the communist conspiracy. It would be unreasonable to expect me to pass on to you in the next 15 minutes even what little I have learned in those 15 years. But for those who are willing to listen, I shall give you, to the best of my ability, a bird's-eye view of the communist conspiracy since 1917, step by step. Actually, of course, the communist conspiracy is quite deep-rooted. To start at the beginning, we should have to go back to the decades preceding the French Revolution. But much about the origin and early development of this now gigantic evil force remains in the historical shadows. So let us begin this very brief outline where the record becomes factual and clear. 1. In 1917-18, Lenin, Trotsky, and a relative handful of ruthless criminals seized power in Russia. 2. In 1922, after unlimited use of terror and torture in establishing their tyranny, this communist gang consolidated Russia proper, Russian Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Belarus, and the Ukraine into the Union of Socialist Soviet Republics. 3. By 1929, Stalin had exiled Trotsky and established himself as the successor to Lenin. During the next 10 years, through merciless massacres in the Ukraine and elsewhere, and then through a ruthless purge of most of his old fellow revolutionaries, Stalin made himself the absolute boss of the communist world. 4. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt officially recognized the Soviet regime, thus saving it from financial collapse and at the same time opening our doors to an ever-increasing army of communist diplomats, agents, and spies. 5. By 1939, Stalin's long and extensive plans for plunging the world into another war through the sword spy ring and other worldwide diplomatic espionage and propaganda activities were ready for fruition. He then precipitated the war by encouraging Hitler, through a temporary alliance, to invade Poland. 6. By the end of 1941, the United States had entered the war. The alliance between Moscow and Washington was now official. Communist infiltration into positions of power in our government, our press, our educational system, our church organizations, our entertainment field, and every other division of our national life had been steadily increasing since 1933, when Roosevelt became president. 7. At the end of the war, many new manifestations of the fundamental communist principle of exact reversal came into play, and on a massive worldwide scale. To understand this fully, it must be realized that everything about communism is a part of one big lie. It is the very purpose of those who control the communist movement to turn all the world's values upside down, to replace truth with falsehood, order with chaos, religious ideals with satanic immorality, freedom with slavery, compassion with cruelty, and love with hate. These are all ends in themselves, but they're also the means for achieving communist power, as has been clearly spelled out in the communists' own literature for more than 100 years. 8. In 1945, for instance, the communists contrived a plan for the United States to finance a great deal of their worldwide progress. The American Foreign Aid Program was conceived by communists, started and nourished along by communists, and built eventually by communist influences and propaganda into gigantic proportions as a means of helping the communists and their socialist forerunners everywhere in taking over their respective countries. 9. Another manifestation of the same principle at work was the establishment in 1945 of the United Nations. This organization was conceived by communists, founded by communists, has always been controlled by communists, and has been used increasingly and ever more brazenly to carry out communist purposes. But it was sold by propaganda and pretense to the American people and to most of the rest of the world as a means of maintaining peace and preventing communist aggression. Obviously, we do not have time in so brief a report as this for a lot of scholarly footnotes to support our analyses. But let's make time for one reference anyway, simply because the true nature and purpose of the United Nations have been so cleverly and successfully hidden from most of the American people. And since you can get basically the whole story in just one carefully documented book, it is The Fearful Master, a second look at the United Nations by G. Edward Griffin. We suggest that you buy the $1 paperback edition at any American Opinion library or order it direct by mail from American Opinion, Belmont, Massachusetts, 02178. That's The Fearful Master, $1 postpaid from American Opinion, Belmont, Massachusetts. And now we move on to step number 10. Most important of all these gigantic reversals of the truth, which we are listing, however, has been the cruel pretense all over the world and to the American people that the United States was the one great enemy of communism. The fact has been exactly the opposite. Since 1944, the most powerful single force in promoting communism everywhere and in turning one nation after another over to the communist tyranny, as in Czechoslovakia and China and Cuba and the Congo, has been the help of the United States government to that end. The record to support this statement, and those we have made above, is absolutely clear to anybody who will give it objective study. 11. During the period of 1944 through 1950, with the constant help of various agencies and officials of our government, Stalin extended his European empire to include Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Albania, Bulgaria, Romania, Yugoslavia, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and East Germany. During that same period, and with the same help from Washington, Stalin extended his Asiatic empire to include Mongolia, Manchuria, North Korea, and all the mainland of China. And the march of Soviet imperialism towards complete global conquest was well underway. 12. One huge part of the communist big lie is that communism is an uprising of the downtrodden masses against bosses and rulers who exploit them. Again, the exact opposite is true. Communism is, in every country, the drive of a closely knit gang of megalomaniacal criminals, most of them in the very top social, financial, educational, and political circles of that country, to impose their brutal rule from the top down and maintain it ever more rigidly and tyrannically over the total population. And the condition of the masses is always made worse in every respect by the success of these conspirators. Acting on this strategy, and on a very important extension of it known as anti-colonialism, the communist overlords have now established their formal rule over almost half the peoples and their informal but preponderant influence over practically all the governments of the whole earth. The exceptions include the governments of Spain, Portugal, West Germany, South Africa, Rhodesia, Nicaragua, Paraguay, Nationalist China, New Zealand, and Australia, but not, unfortunately, the United States. Although at least 98% of all federal employees are, we believe, entirely loyal and patriotic, the communists now have working control over our government because of the prestige and position and influence of the other 2%. The one great final job left for the communists is subjugation of the people of the United States. Among the methods they are employing to achieve that result are A, the deliberate and insidious breaking down of all morality and every sound sense of values. B, the distortion and destruction of religious influences, especially on the lives of the young. C, the constant indoctrination of young and old alike through our educational system and through our communications and entertainment media in a preference for welfare and security against responsibility and opportunity. D, making an ever larger and larger percentage of American industry, commerce, agriculture, education, and individuals accustomed to receiving and dependent on government checks. E, a constant increase in legislation, taxation, and bureaucracy leading directly towards 100% government. F, the creation of riots and the semblance of revolution under the guise and excuse of promoting civil rights. G, developing this Negro revolution into a broader proletarian revolution of the have-nots against the haves. H, destroying the power of local police forces to preserve law and order. I, carrying on and steadily escalating a completely phony foreign war, because the communists are actually running both sides of it, as an excuse for gradually establishing more and tighter government controls over every detail of our daily lives. J, and eventually bringing about peace a few years from now by surrendering all American sovereignty to the United Nations and enabling that communist one-world government to police our country with foreign troops and mercilessly suppress all opposition. If you cannot see all of these things happening right before your eyes, then you had better start looking around you with some much-needed realism. For the truth is, ladies and gentlemen, that they are happening, and not by natural causes, but by evil design. Finally, please permit me one short paragraph about our own organization. We believe that the John Birch Society and its allies constitute the one force capable of awakening enough of the American people in time to the fact that not only it can happen here, but that it is happening here and now. Our whole job is to create understanding, and our only weapon is the truth. But the truth is the one and only thing the communists cannot stand. This is why we have been smeared and lied about more extensively and more viciously than any other organization we believe in all American history. But we are still bringing out the truth about the communist conspiracy as in this very broadcast. And we hope it will move many of our listeners to a greater determination to learn for themselves the real significance of so much that is happening all around them.
We want to thank all those who've taken time to listen to the John Birch Society Report, which has again focused attention on important subjects directly involving you. Our commentator today has been Robert Welch. If you would like a copy of today's message, please send 50 cents for one copy or $1 for 3 copies to the John Birch Society Report, San Marino, California. Please enclose a stamped, self-addressed envelope. Ask for